my brain is basically investment banking and Rick Sanchez quotes, because also what we were just chatting now. So yeah, I mean, great return, actually. On reflection, great return. All right, there's 45 people, others will come, but I think I'm gonna kick us off. Welcome everyone to our second session ever as part of Salmon Theory. We're now doing events. You got to diversify, and this is also quite fun and more educational than just reading emails, I suppose. And yeah, it's all about stopping overcooking your social strategy, because I think, well, certainly our guests today, which we'll introduce in a little bit, I think we all share a belief that social strategy sometimes is a little bit more complicated than it should be, or sometimes it's not even a strategy because people just get hung up with whatever the latest thing that they saw on TikTok, and suddenly that becomes everything they care about. So we're gonna try and unpack some of that. Just to kind of as a warm-up, I know there's people dialing in from all over. So where are you dialing in from? Like, do little intros on the chat if you want. You know, even if you want to say where you're from and where you work. So we have people from London. I'm sure there's gonna be tons of people from London. Mexico. Oh, Andres, I recognize you. Hey, how's it going? Brooklyn, Brazil, Greece, South Africa, Philadelphia, Germany, Colombia. Very nice. Durham. Yeah, I imagine there might be a few people from Lisbon as well, at least if I recall from the attendance list. But yeah, keep introducing yourselves just so I have a broad sense of yeah, where you're dialing in from. I do have to say, what you'll see today is some examples of probably a little bit, there's probably a little bit of a US, UK skew, but I think depending on like even the types of people that come and attend these things, if there's particular brands in those markets that we may want to look at, because I imagine there's like interesting stuff happening in markets that are not those two that perhaps we may want to explore next, although the language is going to be an interesting one. But like, I know, for example, Brazil have amazing social stuff to look at, but if you don't know Portuguese, Anyway, yeah, keep introducing yourself in the chats if you want. And yeah, I'll just start. I'm gonna do a little intro about why we're here, what we're doing here, and then frankly, you're here hopefully for our guests, not for me. They're gonna do a bulk of the talking. But yeah, we started doing these things because there's a fundamental belief, certainly in some of the people I speak to, that social strategy gets overcomplicated, and that doesn't really help anyone. It gets too trend dependent. I mean, goodness me, before people sort out the fundamentals, they start asking what they should react to today, and it just creates, frankly, a lot of tension and a lot of anxiety that I don't think helps. I would probably argue that a lot of burnout we see in the marketing industry probably is influenced by the fact that we're all just chasing our tails every bloody day. So there must be a better way. And as a result as well, I think there's a lot of this, and including other skills that we see that sometimes don't really get applied in business. Social strategy doesn't always get internal respect, and part of that is because people don't always understand the space. Part of it is because we don't always explain the value that the space brings for a brand or a business. Probably a combination of the two, and I'm sure that's going to come up in conversation as well. Last time, for example, we had a really good debate about just practical skills of how to basically sell your expertise internally, being good at stakeholder management and stuff like that, which is really important as well to have these conversations. And as a result, really, and that was kind of the basis of the title for this event, we overcook things at our own expense. We end up being stressed all the time, not having clarity of thought, not really having a clear framework that we can take the business through so they can, frankly, kind of get off our backs and let us do our job, and so on and so forth. So my hope is that today we start unpacking some of that with three spectacular guests. Also, we're all anti this. This doesn't help. Like, right? I think people people sound smart when they say, hey, we should be more like Nutter Butter. And I've said it as well. Like, I'm not an angel, but the reality is this sort of stuff doesn't always help either, because they're great. They're just not realistic for 90% of the cases. You know, my favorite anecdote from back in the Ryanair days is that people would say, oh yeah, we want to be more like Ryanair. And then they would get a reality check when you realize that Ryanair had like 10 people running their socials, and some of them only did TikTok. And we had like half an intern's time, right? It's just not possible, right? So rather than aspire to like the top of the game, aspire to someone who's slightly ahead of you, but knowing what those references are, depending on the brand, is really important. And that's kind of what we want to do here. You will see one example that is kind of borderline brands that everyone else tries to emulate, but broadly speaking, we try and look at examples that aren't as discussed in the industry, or at least not in our circles. In order to do that, we have 3 great guests and a wonderful moderator. So Rox, Christian, and Heleana very, very kindly accepted my invitation to come in and chat about this stuff and basically give up their lunch times, because they're all UK based. So I'm really thankful for that. And we have also Burke. I'll let them all introduce themselves in a minute, but Burke has been doing a lot of the heavy lifting for this in the background. He's going to be doing some community management. He's basically been the head of research for this. He found the brands. You know, he's been looking into a lot of the examples that I thought were interesting to discuss. But yeah, I'm gonna let you all introduce yourself. So Rox, do you want to go first?
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, so hi everyone. Excited to be talking all things social strat today. Favorite thing to do. A bit about me. So I have always worked in the realms of social, I guess, back kind of in the day when even paid social wasn't a thing, so maybe shows my age, but from like building brands in-house. So started out at the likes of uni days when they were a startup, so they're a student discount brand, to like bigger media agencies, so your media comms, IPG media brands, but also smaller digital agencies, where I started moving a bit more into paid. But probably my latest in-house company role was as social planning director at Social Chain. So I've noticed a few of my alumni in the attendees chat. Hi, Catherine. And so, yeah, that role for me was really pivotal because it was moving away from just like either paid social or organic social. And it was looking at that 360 social and how paid and earned not only works together, but works with the creative team, works with you can get that from Pollyanna on last one session. Works with the creative team, works with the broader, like just educating clients on, you know, social needs to be a part of your holistic marketing planning, not just this one thing that jumps on trends. So really, for me, moving into that realm was pivotal. And that's why I kind of started Social Rock. So just enabling like small to medium businesses as well to like access social strategy. So I work collaboratively with brands and companies to not only help them develop that strategy, but also training's a big part of my offering. I like, you know, upskilling people internally. There's some great minds in brands, in companies, in agencies. So just upskilling people to look at social from that 360 perspective. So yeah, not about gatekeeping, which is why I'm here today, but I'll pass to the next person. Christian, next on the...
Thanks, Rox. Hi, everyone. Delighted to be here. A bit about myself. I'll start with what I'm currently doing. I'm currently head of content strategy at an agency called 2 Circles. 2 Circles is a sports marketing consultancy, which predominantly works with sports IP and rights holders. So actually, I will probably be learning loads more from Rox and Heleana and Burke today, because my background isn't traditionally in sort of brands, but it's predominantly in sports. And actually what we're discovering is that as sports try to grow their audiences, because, you know, attention isn't free anymore, actually they're starting to act like brands predominantly as well. So my day-to-day is making sure all the sports IP holders that we manage for channels from a social owned and operated perspective are looked after well and are developing their brand, and, you know, as well as also being a traditional sports IP news holder. So before then, I was head of social, seconded over as head of social to the Premier League, which is an account I still look after and help manage alongside my team. And we also look after the likes of Wimbledon, EA Sports, and various others, some which I can't mention publicly as well. So yeah, we manage a social audience size of about 450 million people now globally, and we manage over 80 pages, all with a team of about 110 people globally. So we're used to being scrappy. We're used to sort of squeezing out everything. We publish huge amounts on a daily basis, and hopefully I'll be bringing some of what I know around formats and popular formats and how that works in a fan-centric way, and ultimately brands wanting to make fans of their products or fans of their services is a big motivation of mine as well. So yeah, really excited to get going and talking through some of the things we'll be talking about. Over to you, Heleana.
Yes, hello everyone. My name is Heleana Blackwell. I am a senior planner at Oliver. I'm also the author of a newsletter called Stand Up Brands. And I got into, I used to be a tech PR and then a social media expert back in the day where there were 10 a penny, there was loads of these people, and then sort of moved from that into strategy. And now I'm an integrated planner, which means that in practice, that I find myself working across, connecting social to other parts of the marketing mix. Now, the other thing that I've recently sort of found a specialism in is I love an unloved category. I love something where social is considered to be something where you just end up putting up some content landfill or half-assing it. So perfect example is your insurance companies, you know, your asset managers, you know, all those sorts of things. Sort of things where people kind of almost worry about doing social because they worry that it's affecting their gravitas. That these are the places that I absolutely love. And so, yeah, I've worked across anything from automotive through to all of these as well. And yes, as Rob says, one of the reasons I like boring clients is because they've got a lot of money, but they also, there's a lot of scope. And I've got a real interest because I also, in my spare time, like to write and perform stand-up comedy, but bringing a bit of levity and joy to these areas as well. So giving them a bit of shake-up and giving them an opportunity to find ways to express themselves that are still aligned with the truth of their brand and their brand voice. So yeah, that's me.
Cool, Burke. Tell us about.
Yeah, I guess I'm next. Yeah, hi everyone, I'm Burke, freelance strategist. Been in the agency world for the past 4 or 5 years, and more recently helping out Rob with these webinars. And yeah, I'm excited to be moderating today. So hopefully you don't leave me on read or unread or seen or whatever the case may be, because I'll be active in the comments.
Yeah, and please, as we go through, like if you all have questions or comments, please drop them in, because they might spark something interesting for us to discuss. We're going to have questions at the end as well. So yeah, make this a chat, because otherwise, yeah, otherwise it's not as good as it could be. And yeah, for those who don't know me, my name's Rob Estreitinho. I'm a strategy director. I've been in this game since 2009. I'm financial crisis professional, baby. But yeah, I've been doing this for a while. Always worked in social, but kind of do a bit of all sorts of strategy these days: brand strategy, comm strategy, social strategy. But social is kind of my heartland, so I quite like it. I also, well, I imagine all of you now know, because some of you I actually added to the mailing list the other day. I write a newsletter called Salmon Theory, and I also I run a community called Salmon Crew, which is a private community. And the reason I want to highlight that as well is because A, you should totally join, and B, Heleana, Christian, and Rox are in the community. So if you want to get to know them better after this, please do join. We talk there every day. It's basically like a new space on top of the newsletter, which is free for all. So yeah, this private community is something I kind of care deeply about, and especially because I get to meet smart people. So part of the value as well is not only we talk about these things, we want to host new events like this. Basically, I just want to do them with people who are in that community, because there's already a chemistry between them. So that's enough of my pitch. Thank you all for being here. And yeah, today we want to do what I call a bit of reverse engineering. Here's the thing, like none of us really know what any brand social strategy is unless they tell us, but we can infer some things. We can reverse engineer some things. So we today want to discuss three brands that we think are quite distinct. We want to do some collective reverse engineering on what's going on there based on some examples of work, because again, that's all we really have access to. I know our guests would never do it, but I do have to stress that like we're going to try and be as practical as possible. There's probably terms that are a bit like low-key banned in these events. So things like as long as it's relevant, like that's a red flag. That's a yellow card, right? You get 2 of those. But yeah, so we're authentic. Like all these terms, that's like, oh goodness me. So we're going to try and be as rigorous as possible and as precise as possible with our language, not because we want to be like academically spot on, but just because that's how we become useful, is we actually use clear terms to describe what's going on in a brand social strategy. And specifically, we're going to look at these 3 brands. Burke's going to do a little bit of an intro to each brand because he's done that research. But there's going to be 3 questions we're going to ask our panelists. One is, looking at those 3 examples, what do we think the objective for this brand is on social, or what their role is? If you want to talk in objectives terms, you can. If you want to talk about the role of social and the wider marketing mix, you can. We're going to try and work out who's the target audience, what are the problems or the barrier or the tensions that they might have in their life that particular bit content is trying to resolve. And then everyone's favorite, we're going to talk about tone of voice. And one other word that we're not allowed to say is unhinged. So if you say unhinged, that's another yellow card. Unless you want to say, I'm not going to say unhinged, but, and then you say something else entirely. But basically, we want to try and get to fresh, specific language to describe these brand social strategy. Off the back of this, we're going to do a write-up. So don't worry about making furious notes. We are going to write this up for you. That's why I'm recording it. That's why I'm transcribing it. But hopefully it becomes a useful session. So let's get into the brands. Let's start with the first one, really, which is the one that is the more contentious one. So we're going to have about maybe 15 to 20 minutes to talk about this. We added here Surreal. I think Surreal is kind of, Burke, tell us a bit about, why we included Surreal, and also give us a bit of a teaser about one of the debates we started having with the panelists even before this thing started.
I mean, like you said, obviously the idea is not to include all of the big name brands, but I think with Surreal, I don't want to give too much away about that debate. I rather just want to like let it kind of happen. So I'm not going to get into that, but we'll let it kind of happen. But for those of you who don't know, they're like a high protein, like low carb cereal brand for adults, and they're based in the UK. But yeah, they just kind of have their own approach, and they kind of do things in their own way, and they kind of go in their own lane, so to speak, which I really like. But I say we just get into the examples.
All right. Well, hopefully if I press here, it's going to play. Yeah. Okay. Also a bit of context. A lot of these are carousels. That's why there's no sound. When there's sound, you'll hear sound, hopefully. Cool. So that's the first one.
Surreal high protein cereal is now in Waitrose.
He means Waitrose.
We're all about muscles.
And oysters.
One bowl of Surreal cereal is packed with 14 grams of protein, and it's super low sugar. Plus, it tastes way better than Special Kale. Next time you want to feel the burn,
Nay sauce.
head down to Waitrose and get a box of Surreal.
Don't forget the butternut.
Squats!
All right, let's look at the third one. Also carousel. Should probably have some background music for the next one. Like, I'm okay with silence, but yeah. Yeah, if you also want to save or check the examples in your own time, there's going to be a link in the comments in a bit. All right, I think we get the gist. Cool. Let's start. What's the objective here? Who wants to go first?
It's weird. I feel like I want to talk about the audience before the objective because
Let's do it. Start where you want. Yeah.
because I first came across Surreal on LinkedIn, and that immediately spoke to because that was an interesting channel choice because it suggested to me that they were speaking to, frankly, somebody who's got the money to afford a £6 cereal, and I imagine therefore some people who wanted to be kind of fit and healthy, but their busy professional lives were getting in the way, which is hence why it's in Waitrose, as you say, Rob, middle class cereal, 100%. So it looked to me that the job of this, their search was to drive consideration amongst this audience and using humour to cut through specifically.
I think maybe that's part of it, but I also think part of it also is just to create a different type of relationship with this brand that allows you and feel good about spending £6 for a cereal. I mean,
Yeah.
when you're in there and you have a different attitude toward what it is you're buying, it changes the whole purchase mentality. And I think they're trying to probably change that sort of standing in among their target audience. Would be my
Yeah,
guess.
definitely. Rox, you had some interesting thoughts about I suppose, the need state of,
Yeah, I guess like for me, like from that objective perspective, they're entering a market that is so competitive, so like filled with nostalgia and close ties of like everyone knows a Weetabix, everyone knows, porridge and your Quaker oats, and I guess like they need to come with something different to the table. They're not going to compete on spend levels, as you can see by the carousel styles. So they need to be smart, and I think they've done that. I think like for me, you can start to see that where they're going with these segments. Obviously there's a layer where we're hitting, there has to be a level of affluence because it's a £6 cereal. And I think even in that protein space and the protein category as it grows, people are like, that category is shifting. People will spend more on a £3.50 protein bar. But like, even so, it's not featured on here, but they did like a partnership with Gymshark. So they're hitting like, yes, working professionals. So let's lean into LinkedIn. It's those who can probably likely more closely afford it. And then I've put like gym rats because I just like the term. But I think like with that segment, it's just a slightly different skew as well. It's those who can likely justify it. So, they'd probably forgo something else to, try something to make their, mornings a bit brighter. But I think where they've gone with it, it's like they're bringing like the kidult vibes back to it. Just because I'm a working professional on LinkedIn doesn't mean I sit here clearly in a suit all day. It's like, no, I log off at the end of the day and want to be, treated like a princess who doesn't work have to go to work for money. Like, we're all like, it's those like little human takes. Like, they're talking as if he's the naughty guy at work who gets slapped on the wrist by a finance team. Like, I feel like they've thought about this character in their head and they've started, just let someone run with it. Someone who's got funny bones, for instance. I don't think there has to be like, right, you have to hit this, and this. It's just that relatable, as someone said, no, we hate the word, like, but relatable elements of like different like professionals who, you know, are still human. We're still like normal. We crash out and Netflix. Like, you know, I probably will buy the cereal at some point, but I'm probably, you know, have to stop buying a coffee at Costa for a week or something like that, like weighing it up. So I just really like the way they've played with probably a lower budget, but tapping into, starting off with just really trying to connect with a few segments to then, you know, then they'll look to scale. And I think myself and Christian were chatting of, yes, if you look probably deeper at their books, this is the social strategy working at that business level, maybe not, but we don't know the ins and outs of their company. But I think what they're now trying to do is, you see, like, they're in Waitrose, they're in Sainsbury's, they're starting to get that physical availability so they can start to be seen more. And I think that will help from that scaling perspective.
Yeah. That's really interesting what you mentioned, Rox, is the point around the role of the character and how that can sort of be used to help connect and build, you know, sort of kind of brand love and so on. Because it made me think, and this is going to sound like a bit of an interesting comparison, but Innocent from over there ages ago, and how they totally sort of blew Twitter with their sort of with a really distinct character, really distinct tone of voice. It's like, it is to me that they've sort of maybe learned from that style potentially. Someone's just said here, the copyright is ex-Innocent. There you go.
Love it. That totally makes sense.
But it really does speak to what Patrick, thanks for your thoughts, mentioned about this idea of an attitudinal shift that, you know, as you say, Vox, you know, they're not going to be able to outspend, so they need to outsmart, and the way that they need to do that they're doing that is just by owning a character and just going hell for leather. So yeah, it's really interesting.
As like Rox, your point around it being a relatively dry category, it is quite easy that just a simple bit of creativity allows you to get a bit of excess share of voice. And actually just by going against the category norms, especially as it was it's founded as a D2C product, right? Founded as you have to go online and subscribe. So actually you need to buy into the brand when actually you might not even be able to taste it first, which is quite an unusual proposition for a cereal when you need probably high trust or some heritage behind it. So I think they're brave in pushing against category norms, especially when they are health centric. And actually the health centricism doesn't really come across a huge amount, other than that second element we saw around you know, the gym rat sort of being in Waitrose, which I think is really nice. My concern, which is something that started the debate, and again, hands up, no context, no idea on budgets, don't know anybody working there, is that I don't think a consumer product, which is ideally should be starting your day, should be found on LinkedIn first. It feels like it's written by marketers for marketers, and marketers is probably a completely healthy category that they want to go after, but it just feels slightly too, sometimes I think, and that second example to one side, in on its own jokes. And you know, most people don't want to hear from a finance team or pretend to want to hear from a finance team, but they're selling the marketing rather than the product sometimes, and that would be my only amber flag.
Yeah, that's an interesting point, Christian, because when I first, I remember when we were first discussing this, you know, whether to include them, and the question of, is it a bit liquid death, did come up, and the question of, is it? Sometimes I come across, and I come across this a lot in the writing of Paul Feldwick, who talks about the idea of how marketing for marketers is very Fleabag, and actually you should be more Mrs. Brown's Boys if you want to be, if you want to connect with the real audience, to drive that mass penetration. You want to connect with real audiences. That's what you need to do. So it's quite interesting. Think about it in that way. Could we be more, if we were to say, that we should learn from these brands tonally, that could it take us in that direction of being not connected enough to as broad an audience potentially?
There's I'm trying to piece a few bits based on the brand tracking and then the discussion we were having about their financials, which Rox found the company listing and looked at basically a spectacular rise in expenditure for the business. However, if I were to piece it together, so if you look at the brand tracking, consideration over time has increased over the last 12 months. Obviously, the base is low and much lower than, say, Cocoa Pops, but so at a brand level, something's going on. You might go, are they profiting from it? Probably not, because they're spending to grow, right? And they're spending to basically increase production, show up on Sainsbury's. Like, what I know about these types of businesses is that, like, you got to basically commit to huge production targets to be able to get distributed by these major retailers. So probably for a while, their margins are going to look like shit. But on the other hand, with more distribution and more physical availability may come a greater nudge to purchase. And so, it feels like, at least based on this tracksuit stuff, that some things are working at a brand level. And if you combine that with the physical distribution, it may pay off. And I would argue a similar example to Liquid Death, because that was that argument as well a while ago. But as we know, who knows? But certainly it seems like there's some things going well here, even if it is for a while, just like marketers talking about it. But hey, marketers eat cereal too, I suppose, especially 6-pound cereal. Let's get into tone of voice. You can't use the word unhinged. What is the tone of voice of Surreal?
I think it's really brave to try and be funny. I think being funny as a brand is generally one of the hardest things you can do. And actually, you need to hire genuinely professional comedians or people who are, and not even just the funniest guy in the office. You need to know somebody who can, shock horror, structure a joke in a way which has a beginning, a middle, and an end, and that fits a lot of the storytelling we try to do. I do think they are funny, but I actually think some of it is funny. Some of it is funny because it's aimed to somebody like me. But even just using some puns in a long form video is just simple, effective, but actually probably ages to write and getting the right terminology. So tonally, I think we're quite accessible. I think we're quite accessible in a professional setting way, in a very white collar way, and I think that has helped them stand out in that category. I can't think of another cereal brand other than maybe Cocoa Pops who attempts to be funny, but I'm now racking my brains and panicking, so I'm gonna pass on to Roxanne and Heleana to say something far more sensible.
I think that's completely right, and I think just adding onto that, I feel like being naughty is probably part of their tone of voice and a key thing. Let's try and be really naughty at least once a week, see if we can get a slap wrist, just see how far we can push it. I always just say they're like a bit of a kiddle, but if you are like a challenger and you're an underdog, you've got to be a bit naughty, otherwise you're just going to blend and feed into that sea of same. And I think even in some of their posts, they use Comic Sans and stuff. So it also just makes me feel a bit sick, but that's because it's nostalgic to me. I feel like there's definitely probably this millennial vibe behind it because we remember Comic Sans. And, the finance team will tell us off and stuff. If, it's kind of these common connections through a lot of relatable human truths, not just in marketing, but, if I work at, my Tesco's, I've got a finance or a manager who's going to come and tell me off. So I feel like there's these common truths there. And I think just naughty, realistic wit, a bit of nostalgia plays in, all to get that kidult feeling, bring in the childlike joy of finding a toy in your cereal, making that adult again, that no other brand have done that. It's all towards adult cereal is just boring and a bit get up and strive for your day, where these guys are you should buy us, and we know we're expensive, but at least we're a good laugh as well. And then we've got these other benefits, blah blah blah. So long-winded, naughty.
It's a good. I really like the word naughty to jump on to. It made one of the things I like to do, because as somebody who writes comedy, I also love watching loads of it. Is I like to connect a brand to a specific kind of comedian. Which kind of comedian would this be? And I had a little look, and I've sort of landed on James Acaster.
Yes.
Because he is a little bit surreal in and of himself, but he also has this. It's what's interesting about. I think that the kind of naughtiness it is an equal balance between relatable and surrealness. I think they like to balance those two things. So that's where some of those sort of nostalgic kidulty vibes come from, in my view. But then they'll sort of throw in the ridiculous finance. They're hoping you're having an accurate day, which totally had me in stitches. I just love that. So I find that sometimes when I start to look at specific, so I kind of almost look at it like brand archetypes in a way. So that you can kind of go, well, what comedian is this discipline connected to? So if you had a look at one of his shows, he's got quite a few cool shows on. Like there's one called Cold Lasagna Hate Myself. I'm particularly a fan of. Some of the sort of the style of jokes there is worth exploring, I would say. So yeah,
I love that. I love the character stuff, because I always do that. I try to, because it just helps my brain. I wrote one down. I was thinking, from The Office, Tim.
Oh yes,
Simon's role, because he's like seeing the ridiculousness through his, like, we feel like we're Tim.
Yes.
Like, we've got that wit, but like
it's that one step behind type thing, isn't it? Yeah.
I think that as well as it being like category defining, there's also an element of like the economic realities that they find themselves in and that everyone else finds themselves in. And I'm going to absolutely bastardize a few studies I read years ago around humor being the big push 2009 after the Great Recession, and actually using humor in a way where actually, do you know what, you kind of don't want a glum cereal at the moment. You don't want to start your day with a glum sad cereal, and starting breaking through and being funny in an environment where actually there's not a huge amount of humor at the moment left, right and center is, again, I think a smart play.
It's interesting, Christian, when you mentioned the uptick in interest in humour following the financial crisis, because years later, now there is more talk of research of humour post-COVID. There was a Cannes Lions report that said exactly that. So it's interesting that you get these waves after moments of crisis.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I was just on tone of voice. I share the resource, which I always go back to, which is every time I start boring myself on how I'm thinking about a brand's tone of voice, I just go to the archetypes that a guy called Nick Parker put together, and he basically calls them the primary voices, a bit like the primary colors, and they're just great to kind of somewhat systematically put brands in different boxes. And I suppose for these guys, yeah, playful child, big time, and then a bit of a fire starter, because they're just, yeah, that naughtiness is definitely something that I think comes through. All right, should we move on to brand number 2, which is more B2B focused ish, because it also speaks to end consumers and customers. But let's talk about Figma. Burke, tell us what Figma is.
Yeah, so for those who don't know, they're a tech company that created a collaborative tool for designing and building products. But now it's kind of used for all sorts of things beyond just that. Actually, in one of the videos, it's going to be somebody describing what they do for a living through using Figma. So I'm sure a lot of people here also can't describe that to their parents, which probably is really relatable. So yeah.
Absolutely. All right, let's have a look.
Huge news for Figma fans. Figma has officially launched in Australia. Physically. Like, there is a Figma office in Australia now. Like, Figma has been available in Australia, but now it's physically in Australia. And I partnered with Figma for a quick design challenge. And you'll never guess which program it's in. Now, I'll be honest, I've only designed a handful of things in Figma in my 45 plus years of design experience. But when I have, it's always been a good time. So for this poster, I also wanted to have a good time. I started with a phrase that would signify the importance of Figma launching in Australia. So I went with, we got Figma in Australia before a new Elliot video, as it has been 8 months since I last posted on YouTube after promising monthly videos. I get the same gratification from announcing something as I do from doing something. After playing around with the text layout, I settled on something that looked cool in Elliot before adding some extra elements dotted around the poster. I really like Figma's color palette as well. I think it's really cute. So I wanted to stick to those colors to pay homage to this lovely design program. I also played around with some plugins and widgets, which are my favorite part of Figma. Big fan of the noise plugin because I am a graphic designer and I need to add noise to everything, which is still a funny joke. And here's the finished poster, another Elliot classic. Thank you, Figma, for launching in Australia. And I humbly accept the role of head of Figma Australia. My first order? Make the logo bigger.
It's looking for too long.
Yeah, all right, let's watch video number 2. Right, let's watch video number 3. This one I'll do a bit of an explanation because it is a bit tiny. They're naming this color Strong because he's Jeremy Strong. So 3 types of, and there you go. He's wearing a very green thing. Looks like the Queen, weirdly, from a few years ago. Right. Where do we want to start on this? Objective audience or tone?
Well, the audience is, I think if we start there again, it's clearly designers, right? It is people who could use Figma, currently use Figma, or are maybe thinking of becoming a client or user of Figma as a wider base. And I think it's fairly on the nose in a way which is going to cut through.
My build maybe, and I don't know, just because I was having a look at some of their other stuff, and I do love their LinkedIn stuff, and I think it differs per channel for them as well. But even just like the point of view, showcasing to your parents what you do for a living, like for them to scale, they probably need more companies and more teams to start using it, right? So I don't know if maybe like the objective move and like coming into these like different use cases is to try and broaden the entry points. There was one video that had what's your design ins and design outs this year, but they didn't just ask the designers, they asked like the project manager, a product innovator. So for me, I feel like that was their bullseye, that obviously they need to engage, because if they can't be the specialists and go to within graphic designers, who else is going to want to? Those people are going to be their core that are going to talk about them, recommend them. But to scale is potentially now looking outside those, the other people within the team that can access it. And even like the Jeremy Strong, like a use case, like I'm not a designer, but I don't know, the colors get you good. Like if someone's creatively inclined that way, it's like linking like culture, because he was where everyone was like confused by the bucket hat and the color of the suit, but linking that and always ensuring there's like creative over the top of it. It's just being able to connect with more people, but still have that creative like specialist undertone with it. So I don't know. I feel like there could be their next move is trying to like just provide more use cases, entry cases for the broader team.
Yeah, I see that case for branching out, especially because what's unique about Figma is not only the fact they're a design and prototyping tool, but they're a collaboration tool around design.
Yeah, I was going to say.
Yeah, absolutely.
It's really interesting what you say, Rox, about additional use cases, because Christian, who rightly mentioned about designers, but I've used Figma in a workshop, and as a strategist, you wouldn't expect that. It was just like all the journey design it helps you to do is a perfect example of that. So I'd be very unsurprised if your intuition, Rox, wasn't utterly correct, that actually they are trying to push at the edges of the product's flexibility and encourage consideration from broad audiences.
Yeah, definitely. What do we think about the tone of the first video? It draws heavily from that creator's tone. I imagine he's a creator, but let's use that as a because I mean you laughed at the end, Heleana, which is always a great sign. I found it quite interesting. But yeah, what do we think about that tone of voice?
It's interesting because I don't think they've landed on their unique voice yet. And it might be that I need to watch even more of their content. Maybe that is specific to that influencer. So, I noticed that at the end of that, the reason why I like laughs at the end, because it was like they'd created a deliberately awkward moment that and I like sort of that sort of experience from a comedy perspective. But the content I've seen them just seems to be very different. I think they broadly want to be funnier. And I think that they're probably on a journey about finding their unique kind. And I think it can be quite difficult for more B2B or B2B2C brands, because they tend, broadly speaking, to have less marketing maturity in terms of breadth than B2C brands who are used to sort of flexing their muscles in that way. So yeah, I would assume that they are on the journey, is my way.
Yeah. It also doesn't surprise me if that's the case, because usually these companies are very product oriented and very tech oriented, and maybe in their case design oriented, but they're not marketing oriented. They're not brand oriented. But how would you describe that comedian's style? Because what I liked about it is that, like, there's maybe, I don't know if it's deadpan humor, but like where would you put it on the humor scale?
That's an interesting one, because I can't immediately think of somebody, because he's not serious enough to be, say, Ramesh Ranganathan, who's a bit more sort of aggressive. So yeah, I'm starting to think of an exact comedian that would sort of hit that mark. But I think that yeah, I think because they've got lots of different flavors in there, I'm struggling to hit on an exact person yet.
Yeah. Yeah, it's interesting, but at least they tried something that was a bit more offbeat, I suppose, in terms of humor. So it's a bit like, I don't know, if someone one day partners with Anthony Jeselnik, which, if you don't know, is a phenomenal comedian, very not suited for work. So, but just go in with that in mind. But yeah, it just felt like it's a strange type of humor I don't always see online, and that for me at least stood out. Maybe it's very common in Australia. I have no idea.
I think it's like the in jokes, like you have to be really like in the know, and I think that might be their journey if they're trying to expand the use cases. Like that one's probably an example of like, this is still us like being true to our inner core, what we were originally made for, and that's lists in design. Because I noticed someone had put loads of like gags of like InDesign jokes and completely went over my head.
Yeah, I had no fucking idea.
Like other people, like, that's great. And I feel like then you're not, even though you're opening your entry points and your occasions for usage, you're still not ostracizing your original character. But yeah, I think they just need to find the tone that kind of like a tone that kind of transfers across, is flexible across all use cases and the new segments they want to tap into. So it'd be interesting to watch their journey.
Yeah, get product management humor. Here we come.
It's very TikTok skitty. Like every now and then you'll see a TikTok which does a skit like that. And I think in terms of tonally, I really like that they're actually creating a lot of content with creators and designers. And I'm certain that Figma probably have a load of AI tools, but actually all of it is like co-created by humans. None of it is like, hi, I'm a person, I'm going to sit here and I'm going to demo something for you and show you how powerful AI is. It's much more still like human and creator driven. And as someone who's a bit of a well, not AI cynic, I don't think that's right, but it feels distinctly different to how maybe I'm seeing Adobe going about their AI tools at the moment, which is very much you type this, press a button and it's done for you. It's much more still creator and human driven, which I think feels quite potentially fresh in a way which it maybe wouldn't have been 2 to 3 years ago.
It's an interesting point that you make there, Christian, because I do wonder whether the Adobes of this world are trying to speak to sort of like the head of procurement that wants to slim down resources by kind of but buying an AI tool that will do some jobs, whereas these people are trying to speak to the sort of person who is actually using the tool. So they're almost going bottom up rather than top down, because often many things have entered agencies just because so many people are using the free version, and then they start lobbying for the paid.
I think sorry, Rob, go on.
I was just going to say there's an analogy in my mind. So Adobe actually tried to acquire Figma a couple of years ago, and I think it got blocked because of the antitrust issues. The analogy in my mind, and I don't know if this is completely true or not, but it feels like Figma is more for craft-heavy and kind of fast-moving kind of companies, whereas Adobe is enterprise, right? They've always been enterprise since bloody ages. So the analogy for me is a bit like Salesforce and Slack. Like Salesforce acquired Slack. They basically do similar things, although they're more complementary. But it's like, well, there's a customer base there that they don't really want to have these like humongously heavy automated enterprise systems. They actually care about the craft and still being involved in stuff. So yeah, it just felt like it's probably speaking to a different class of business that in their case is complementary. That being said, Adobe do have, maybe not so much now, because everything now has AI everywhere, but I remember they were very like creative focused a number of years ago, because I used to work with them. Maybe less so now, because everyone now has an AI driven something. Sorry, Christian, go on.
I'd say that craft point is actually a really good segue into what I was going to say, which is you can tell that like Instagram is just a little bit of a labor of love. Like it's an absolute visual feast when I scroll down, and there's so much you can learn, and so much you can look at, and so much you can take away from it. And inversely, that's just not working for them on TikTok. Like it is just like the over design, the over creation. I think on Instagram they have 700,000 followers, and I think it's a bit of an older account. On TikTok they have 19,000 followers, and are publishing basically the same type of content. And they clearly, to Roxanne and Heleana's point about not quite getting their tone of voice yet, because they don't have a rough tone of voice. They don't even know how to speak within the social platform categories as well. And they're also not publishing anywhere near enough for what should be a big creative platform and should have people making stuff with it all the time. But that's just my personal opinion.
Yeah. All right. Heleana, I know you need to go in a minute, but shall we talk about the last one? Because I know it's a sweet, close to your heart example. So let's do it. Progressive Insurance. Actually, Burke, if you're okay, Heleana, what is Progressive Insurance? Tell us because you suggested these guys. I'd never.
Yes, I did. So they are a sort of a home insurance company. They specialize in kind of home, car, and also sort of B2B insurance as well. But they mainly target these ads at sort of home customers. And I first came across them through their Above the Line campaign. And their Above the Line campaign sort of talks about this idea of how when, particularly millennials, when they suddenly sort of start to own stuff, they are burdened by the weight of that responsibility, and that turns them into their parents. So they start doing ridiculous things. So I've got this really cool example. I'll pop you a link to one of their YouTube ads about some guy who's cleaning his bins all of a sudden and doing this ridiculous stuff. So what I love about these is that they take the concept of becoming like your parents and dealing with responsibility in ridiculous ways, and then they play it out through social channels.
Right, cool. Well, I know you got to go in a couple of minutes. Let's just play these, and I will do my best to represent the chats we had yesterday about it, because I think it's a genuinely wonderful example. All right.
Oh my gosh, I just rear-ended someone. What the heck? What do I do?
Get out.
I'm so sorry, I looked down for 1 second and
Hey lady, did you ever think to use your... Wow.
Well, you know what? Now that I think about it, I think I swerved into you. Huh?
Maybe I should call Progressive to see what I should do. I don't know if I heard right, but did you say Progressive as in Progressive Car Insurance?
Yes? Oh my gosh, I use them too. Could I get your number?
Sir, I'm married with 5 kids.
For insurance? I don't know what you're talking about, lady.
Oh yeah, sure.
Okay now, you guys stay safe. At least we both have Progressive, am I right? Okay, see ya.
I've got some bad news. No matter how close you stand to the baggage carousel, your luggage won't come out any sooner. And remember, picking up and checking a bag that you know isn't yours, just in case, won't magically make it your bag. I'm sorry. That's not how this works. Thanks for joining me. And remember, you are not your parents.
It's bad, Dr. Rick. I'm becoming my mother. And it all started on my trip to Paris.
Okay. What the heck?
Oh, so dirty. Oh, it's nice. Oh, I saw.
Hey, it's $400 a night, no aircon.
Oh,
Hey.
oh, thank you. Oh, it's so expensive. What's that? Two sorties. Something I'm missing. Okay. I don't even like. Oh, some. Come on. Okay, next. I mean, what's wrong with me, Dr. Rick?
Because I feel like I'm literally transforming into my... No!
All right. Who wants to start here?
I can. But I know like Heleana loved this one, so I'm really sad that she couldn't come in with her passionate background on it. But I guess just from my perspective, and probably like not seeing progressive insurance before, just having a bit of a dig in the background, I feel like there's always been this battle between them and the likes of Geico, who are like really strong on social from back in the day. And I feel like the trust in insurers are a massive thing, and where you might just follow what your mum and dad have always done. They've noticed this, and they've noticed that Geico maybe potentially always outperform them a bit. So I think for me, objective wise, is to really, get in front of and make sure that we're driving consideration of the next wave of insurers. And I think they're just going a bit of, especially in this category as well, they've had to do something different to capture the attention of those next gen light insurers. So I feel like a bit of digging, I feel like, has helped me get to the context of where this content has come from. But again, not fully aware of these guys in the US market. So interested to hear everyone else's thoughts.
As something you can build equity behind. You are not your parents is just such a good line. Like, it's just so like, oh, I can hook this idea on this. Like, it just scatters all the way down. And like, as a positioning in against safe, reliable, everybody knows Geico, I think that's probably quite smart, and that definitely comes across in the content examples we've seen, even to the extent of using slightly differently for a traditionally safe category, using IP they don't own. So using memes and using footage that they don't own is, I think, quite brave, and I think that's speaks to the fact that they're trying to speak to, I guess, what would be a millennial and older Gen Z audience.
Yeah, I agree with you. Like, it's one of those brands where the line becomes a wonderful brief you can keep writing to. You are not your parents is genuinely great. Like, and it's fresh in this category, isn't it? It's funny that some brands, and I think these guys are an example of that, you have such a rich brand platform that there's not much else you need to do. Like, there's obviously things like where, doing your due diligence on where the audience is and what type of humor and whatnot. But beyond that, if you give a creator a brief of you are not your parents, they just do wonders with it. In terms of audience, I think that's pretty bang on, right? It's just people who are entering maybe like their early 30s and are slightly starting to notice that the things they used to find annoying are actually the things they have. I certainly am on that journey. In terms of tone, should we talk a little bit about that? Like, how would we describe this tone of voice?
I think, again, I feel like it's just every brand is trying to become this now. It is like choosing which type of humor you're trying to tap into and what is relevant for, I guess, this category space as well. Like, for me, it is more like that observational humor, like that baggage at the airport feels like it could be in a stand-up, like that observational piece. So I think it's quite smart in the fact that it is kind of, as you said, targeting people, you know, coming into their 30s, starting to be like, you know, actual responsible adults. Whether we are yet, who knows? We try. But again, that's it. And I think telling it from multiple perspectives is quite smart as well. So yes, they've got the Dr. Rick because, you know, it's probably one of their distinctive assets now, off the back of like you're not your parents. But I think as well, and something that I really like to do is they're probably just like giving a reverse brief like to a creator, giving them freedom, like tell a funny story from the perspective of a son around you or not your parent. And I feel like the opening up of creativity there allows them to play with that observational humor from different perspectives as well. So again, and I think that's from a brilliant you know, campaign positioning and strap of you're not your parents. There's so much flex with it and so much you can do with it. I think, yeah, their tone they're leaning into is kind of that observational humor side. Bit of a playful maverick for this space, especially, which is, you know, more typically a bit duller.
Some of it is like a little bit, I'm not going to say unhinged, but I will say chaotic. Like the turning of a camera, the different actors, like that is very, you know, TikTok first format. And, you know, before it was a TikTok first format, it was a Vine format. Before it was a Vine format, it was a, you know, something else format. It's all the same type of delivery, but done in quite a new way. Again, it didn't quite resonate with me. I think some things were just slightly too long, but it clearly is to a brief, and it's clearly to a story they're trying to tell, and they're repeating that across everything. And I think the point I made at the top is talking about formats. You can see that they're doing like video podcasts as well as a format, and they're doing like storytelling, and they're doing like, you know, reversed camera storytelling. So all the things, popular formats that are resonating with that, you know, 25 plus audience are things that they're replicating in their social strategy, and that's quite interesting too. They actually have a great, and they must have put paid media behind it because the engagement figures versus the view figures don't match up, but they did a great collab piece with a backup quarterback, just sort of in a day in the life of, but done in quite a humorous and not too, the player didn't treat himself too seriously, and that kind of works as well. When I watched that the whole way through, I thought that was quite funny.
Yeah, there's something you said there that made me think that it's a bit like I don't know, I'm probably reading too much into this, but it's almost like the over dramatic insurance customer is now embodied in an over dramatic insurance presence. Like a lot of these things, like even, you know, the guy turns into the mother and it's like, no, or like the sister, like the whole thing is maybe 20% more dramatic than it ever needs to be. But that's probably by design, because they went, well, it's a very dramatic category. If you have an accident, it is a bit of a drama. So let's just dial that up and not try and be too soft about it, and almost be a bit unnecessarily loud about it. Is something I quite like. I'm also conscious that like two of these videos kind of over-index on that particular creator style, but there's something that I think is quite cool about that. And I suppose from an objective standpoint, as most insurance advertising and content, I guess, you know, the main thing that these guys are up against, probably, I don't know that much about the US market, but if there are price comparison websites for insurance, it's very easy to bypass brands and go into those price comparison websites. So at least here you have a chance of being noticed and remembered. And then at least when you see a list, this is the example I always give myself, or like when I think about this in insurance, is you may see 3 brands and one of them is really cheap and looks good and the other one's Progressive. At least you get a sense that like, okay, at least I recognize this one. I feel like I've seen them before. And because I've seen them before, I'm more likely to trust them, because, you know, familiarity does a little bit for trust. So it's not like anyone's going to buy insurance off the back of this. But when they do get into the market about once a year, they might be more likely to give them the benefit of the doubt if they do see them on a price insurance website, or if they don't, they might go and see, oh, let's see what these guys are have to offer, because I certainly remember them, and bit of due diligence.
Just jump in, Rob. My only challenge with the tone is, and I've just did a quick check. They've rightly not published anything over the last 4 days because £50 billion worth of damage has just been done by a huge fire in LA. And does the tone offer them enough flexibility to be able to deal with a situation as serious as that? And actually, I know they have a above the line mascot called Flo alongside Dr. Rick. And do they have enough flexibility to actually come out and be quite serious now and go, look, we're working through cases as quickly as possible. We're trying to deal with this. Do they move to CRM to do that? Do they kind of go in a very formal way and just leave social to one side? I think that's probably the smart move. But I would be very curious to see what they publish next in light of what has probably been quite a stressful period for them.
Yeah, or whether they pause social altogether and just go customer channels, or yeah. But yeah, it's a good point. But I guess that's the problem with any humorous approach, right? Even in more serious categories, right? If you're the funny data storage company and then someone gets hacked, it's like, oof, not now, guys. Right. We have about 10-20 minutes left. Does anyone? This has been great, and I think we have tons of good lessons for this, and I'm glad that we got some good conclusions on them, and from the feedback on the comments, it's been helpful for people as well. Does anyone have any questions for our panelists, or just in general that we'd like us to discuss? We have, let's give ourselves 10 minutes, and then we can all go 10 minutes early. If anyone has any questions, please drop them in the comments, and we'll address them. You can always send after and we'll discuss, because as I said, we're all in this in the Salmon crew group, so we can always use the group as a bit of a follow-up discussion space. What do you think is going to happen in the US TikTok ban, and what do we do about it? All right, who wants to do that?
I'll go first. I have takes. I think we might see a little bit of downtime. I don't think Trump's going to be in quickly enough to do an executive order. So I don't think downtime is that bad. What do we do about it? Be prepared for a lot of new Mexican and Canadian followers is what I think is going to happen. A lot of smart teenagers are going to be using VPNs to override it. So that I think will be part of it. And then I think it will be quickly reinstated. I think the fact that they've said they're not going to sell or even come to some sort of agreement is fairly telling. And I think there should be legitimate concerns around ownership of TikTok, in the same way as there should be legitimate concerns around a lot of the owners. Yeah, I don't think a ban is outright, but then you just lean. I don't think the format option changes. I'd look at where else people are going to go. Shorts, reels, the vertical format series still exists. You would probably just be less reliant on the pace of change and pace of culture change that TikTok can enable.
Yeah. All right, another question. Would love to know your favorite or most successful piece of content you've worked on or been part of.
Oh God. Rack my very much. I mean, I'm gonna have a sport one though, Christian. You're gonna hate me.
Go for it. I'll follow my own. So
one that I really enjoyed working on was actually the FA Cup, and I'm not fully go sports. I know a bit about sport, but I think it was just because the client was so clear in what their objective was, and they wanted to grow in new markets. And I think each market, like Brazil, and it was for obviously the FA Cup, so it is still English UK grassroots. So how do you make that connect in Brazil, in Spain? And so it was an interesting one. And I think because they didn't have that intel, what they wanted to create, and they worked closely with Twitter as well, was they created this person. This was, you can tell it was a longer time ago because it was still Twitter. They created this personalized DM bot, so people would enter the chat service, say what team they support. So United's fans are still heavily, most of them are made up in Thailand, for instance. So a lot of people connecting through, choosing their team, and then during the FA Cup, when their team scored, they'd immediately get it clipped, sent to their inbox, who scored it, the time. So it was really cool, and it gave us an insight into like obviously the geos that are interacting with which different teams, but what are the upcoming teams, you know, I don't know, like your West Brom, for instance, that could connect from a geo perspective. But then also in terms of the engagements underneath and the comments that started coming through, there was so much social learning data that we could utilize to then inform the next phase of that. So I think it was, for me, it was really exciting, A, to do a first on a platform, but B, to work with a client that was really open to finding out, using that first campaign as a base to listen to their audience and how to grow and adapt that to different geos and different audiences. So that was my favorite that I worked on, long story short.
I have been privileged to work on some of the best sporting moments over the last 7 years. So everything from Wimbledon Grand Slam finals to Premier League winners to, you know, live updates as we go along. There've been a whole host of like particular moments. I think the one I'll call it out as an example because it hasn't been my best piece of work ever, but I think what it set in motion was 3 months of chaos. And I was the one who published the Premier League is closing down for 3 weeks of COVID tweet, and being like privy to that and that moment was really interesting. And then the way the business responded to kind of go, well, we haven't got any football going on, so what can we do to kind of entertain our followers? We know we're going to a dark period of people being stuck inside, and just watching the entire organization, which isn't particularly big at that time, was about 160 employees. Like, it's a very small organization. Kind of go, well, can we do a live quiz? Because quizzes on YouTube are really, really quick. Can we do goals of a day? Can we do like a whole host of things and rally around that, while also dealing with the fact that they were hemorrhaging money hand over fist? I think was quite inspiring. So as a example of a moment that I had written and published myself, and then it led to a load of other great work. I think the closing of the league for 3 weeks because of COVID is up there, is stuck in my memory, even if the rest of that summer is closed.
Yeah, I have to say, I don't know if this was part of your remit, but for a number of years now, I've kind of used the Premier League YouTube as a great example of taking footage you already have and repurposing it over and over again. So it's like, you know, when Robin van Persie retired, here's the top 10 goals Robin van Persie ever recorded. Like, you already have that footage. Or like when Erling Haaland joined Man City, here's the 50 best Erling Haaland goals. Like, it's just so interesting how on YouTube they are as reactive as they are on other channels, which probably means there's some crazy over-caffeinated video editor somewhere in the building, or maybe 10 of them. But yeah, I quite like how it's like, just because you've used the footage once doesn't mean you can't bring it back over and over and over again, especially because sometimes you just want to watch some classics, like some classic goals, some classic moments from the last 20 years, etc., etc. So I'm a big fan of the Premier League YouTube channel.
Thank you. I think a lesson for that is, in an algorithmic-driven world where your reach is not as high as your follower numbers, your followers are not seeing all the content over and over again. You can afford to repeat things, and I think sometimes social marketers can be hesitant of repeating something because, like, oh, we did that, and we'll get accused of like repurposing. It's like, no, that had like a 10% reach. You like double your chance of success by republishing it again. And I think Michael C, when he used to run the Ryanair channel, they used to have like a folder which was just called social bangers, and whenever something went off, they would just put it in the social bangers thing, and then they just repeat it a week later. And that's super smart. Like, yeah, like reuse, recycle all the time. And yeah, we do that quite a lot.
Yeah, Lucy makes here a good point about, so two things on that. One, what Lucy says, the amount of content people consume, they won't necessarily even remember the content if they see a similar version again. And the other thing as well is exactly what you said, Christian. I'm a big fan of like simple phrases that can just help land the argument really well. And I remember seeing one which was, don't worry about some people seeing it twice, worry about the amount of people who get to see it again. Who get to see it once for the first time. And so the point being that if you post something today and 100 people see it, and then next week you post it again and 50 of those see it again, don't worry about that. Worry about the potential upside of the amount of people who've never seen it even once. So a bit of frequency basically doesn't hurt you, which, you know, is okay. Frequency is absolutely okay in paid media, and then as soon as you hit organic, you go, oh no, we don't want to show it 3 times the same person. It's like, but reach and it's called reach and frequency. It's okay.
Or even like, I think we're having this discussion in the Salmon crew group today. It's like, it's the concept that's really worked. So was it a video piece? And you just switch it into a carousel like Surreal, like it's still the same piece that is gonna, the idea was really strong. So how can you play with it? I think that's another interesting one to take. But yeah, don't fear the frequency, I always say. Like,
don't fear the frequency.
Yeah, because like, I don't remember what I've seen last week. So bloody hell, please tell me again, show it me again, because if I liked it the first time, I like the reminder. I'll watch the same memes all the time. So that's it. Don't fear it.
There's probably something interesting. I don't know if someone studied this about like the familiarity effect of just if you try something once, you see it again, you go, oh yeah, I do remember loving that. There you go. Take it. You know what I mean? Like that familiarity again, like we know that communications wear in via multiple frequencies. For some reason we step into social and we go, oh, but not here, where everything is only 3 seconds long. Well, of course, maybe it's even more so. You need more frequency.
We think everyone's going to go and visit our profile and it might ruin the feed. And it's like,
oh, I had that conversation yesterday with someone. It's like, oh, because the grid. And I go, well, I promise.
Christian looks distraught. PTSD.
Look, I mean, I'm going to take a leap here based on your reaction, Christian. If even the guy who runs the Premier League channels doesn't see evidence of people visiting the bloody profile of the Premier League, then what hope does any of us have left? It's like it's all in feed. It's okay. Just assume that no one's going to go and see the grid. Right. Let's see what other questions we have here. What tips do you have for sole marketers? Just lonely old me. I mean, I think at least 2 out of 3 here are kind of solo-ish. Rox, you work independently. So do I. Christian has a team. Well, Burke is freelance as well, but honestly, like find your people outside the business would be my bet. Doesn't have to be an actual community space, might just be people that you keep tabs on and talk to. Like there are people I've met through the private community I run that I now speak on a one-to-one basis all the time. But even prior to that, like just have like your 2, 3, 4 kind of allies outside of your workplace that are people that you can help and can help you gain perspective. Like there are people I'll literally just voice note and go, can you give me your point of view on this brief I'm working on? Because I know I will help them as much as they will help me. And so even though I don't have a team, it kind of feels like I do. So find that space or those people for you. And they're probably already in your network would be my guess. For small teams, there's maybe one for you, Rox, because you talked to smaller, mid-sized businesses. For small teams with not much capacity for lots of output, what would you recommend would be the #1 focus to move the dial?
It's a great question. And I've worked with a lot of brands that are like this, like we haven't got capacity to do it all. Because I'll be like, look, this would be the North Star strategy. But in realistic terms, it's just not doable. So I think, there's so many considerations to take into play, but it's like, do we have a bit of paid budget? If so, and like what are objectives do we need to show, the stakeholders that we're driving some traffic through? Are we using paid and stuff like that? So I think like just some of the quicker wins that I found, or just to make like life easier, like TikTok obviously has still got better organic reach. If we're just looking organically from a pure reach perspective, you might be looking there. But I think just even similar like to Surreal, like dare to be different, try a new channel. Like I feel like the biggest, just from last year and working with lots of different brands, like the biggest what's the word I'm looking for, like what people aren't maximizing is like social search. It's massively like, and I'm sure you'll agree, Christian, but I'm sure you guys definitely do use it, especially from that YouTube perspective. But like Pinterest, TikTok massively, like even just so I set up a bit of a it's horrible, but like a reactive radar cultural calendar thing. So your first one is, these cultural moments are happening that are relevant. So they're planned ones, but are unplanned ones. So it's like once a week, check in TikTok's creative center for the trends that are rising. And it's not just trends that are like directly and literally relevant to your brand, but is there anything that we can potentially look at, tap into here? Even education brands that I'm working with, it just helps with like what are people asking about, A-level results day, or what are they nervous about? Like, there's so much you can do with search that can feed your content a lot easier. And then just play with formats. If you haven't got video, go with a carousel. At least it's just as long as you're like tapping into things that people are, it's a quick win. They're actively searching for it. So it saves you time in like ideating and guessing. But again, it's just like testing and learning, being consistent. If it's just trialing it on one channel for now, maybe go for TikTok because you haven't got a paid budget. Or, you want to work with a lo-fi video, for instance. Like, I think there's a few things you can do just to like maximize your time that you've got, but be creative and the ideas for concepts as well. But the caveats.
I think to add as well, Rox, I say this not to show off, I promise, but the Premier League today, audience of 400 million people, no, 220 million people roughly, will be managing 7 channels, will be designing everything, will be publishing 20 to 30 things across all those channels. We have 5 people on today across all of that. So actually you can do a huge amount, and yes, we have a natural drumbeat of content creation and a natural drumbeat of things we can talk about, but actually the biggest thing we have is trust, and actually we can move fast and we can fail quickly and we can learn from that super fast. And building the trust in an environment where everybody has an opinion on social media because they all have their own social media accounts is really difficult. But actually think of the things that you can, instead of creating more motivation, remove the barriers to allow you to move quicker and learn quicker, I think would be another thing I'd recommend in terms of being able to move the dial. Publish 8 TikToks in a day and figure out which one works the most, and then do that again the next day. That's the type of stuff which will, I think, change the dial quicker, as well as setting the team up in a way which they will feel empowered to do that too.
So if I were to summarize, I really like both of those things. So one is, Rox, it feels like what you're saying is tap into existing demand, know what people are already searching for, and just answer that. And that you're probably going to get interesting starting points. And then, Christian, as well, to your point, it's like, what I usually say is like, unlike TV, where you actually need to book media and like spend $500,000 or whatever on a TV spot, like the cost of failure in social is crazy low. If you try 8 TikToks today and they all bomb, tell you what, no one's going to remember. That's okay. You get to do it all over again tomorrow, and no damage was done. It's not like you did a campaign that was nationally nationwide and then it bombed and everyone knows. But that's actually a blessing. You get to try all sorts of shit and then stick with the ones that seem to be doing okay, and then just keep doing that. Of course, there's a bit of expectation management. Your grid might look a bit dodgy, etc. But see above, no one's visiting the grid. So yeah. Something else I was going to say and then I'll forget. Maybe not. No, that was it. We're 2 minutes to go. I'm going to wrap us up. Thank you both to Christian and Rox, and to Heleana as well. I'll send her a message after this as well. Thanks everyone for attending. We have 30 survivors here, which is great. It's actually great. Half of you stuck around till the end, so thank you very much. As a little reminder, you're all now on the newsletter. Well, those who confirmed that they were okay to be added are now on the newsletter. If you would like to get to know Christian and Rox and Heleana a bit more, like we're always chatting on the Salmon crew group, so I'd love to have you around. If you have any questions about it, just message me and I'll help you out. And yeah, thanks everyone. And yeah, if you on a classic social first thing, and this is my dad humor coming in, if you hated this, swipe left and just message me. If you love this, just send Christian and Rox and Heleana some love, and Burke, because this is only really possible when they come and show up their brilliance. So thank you, and hope you have a great rest of the day.
Thanks, everyone.
Cheers.
Catch you later.
Bye.
Bye.
Yes.